They said the galaxy had gone silent the day the Black Veil entered the war zone. Not from damage, not from fear, from sheer awe, the calms of a dozen alien species, all hardened empires built on conquest and blood, fell silent as the ship slipped through the void like a reaper in the fog. No flags, no signal pings, just a ripple in subspace that made every sensor flicker and glitch. The kind of glitch you don't fix. The kind that makes admirals sweat and soldiers whisper prayers they forgot. They knew, but inside the Black Veil it wasn't quiet, it never was. The warship was old Earth tech, not sleek like the Vornian cruisers, not fluid like the Chaveth biomass fleets. It was brutal. Sharp edges, cold steel, guns that looked like they were built to kill gods. A relic from a war no alien race had fully understood, a ship built when humanity didn't just want to survive. They wanted to be feared. Captain Tren hailed from the last generation, born during the siege years, raised in underground shelters while orbital strikes lit the sky. He'd been fed stories of extinction and desperation, but also of revenge. His eyes weren't young anymore, but they burned with something unbroken, something primitive, the kind of stare that made even enhanced soldiers look away. He stood at the viewing deck, watching the edge of the war zone approach like a cliff. Beyond it, chaos, wreckage from 3 civilizations, drifted like bones in a cosmic graveyard. Debris floated in patterns that told stories, ambushes, retreats, massacres. 2 factions still fought, though now they'd slowed, watching the silent death machine inch closer. A soft chime sounded behind him. "Captain, we're in range," said Commander Ryland, his second in command. Younger, smarter maybe, but still afraid of the stories. Tren didn't turn. "Are the Harran fleets still circling the wrecked moons?" "Yes, sir, and the Zorathi ships have repositioned but not retreated." Of course they hadn't. The Harran believed in overwhelming force, numbers, firepower, arrogance. The Zorathi believed in purity, that only those born into war deserved to wage it. Both believed humanity had died out centuries ago in their little backwater corner of the spiral arm. They were about to learn otherwise. "Open comms," Tren said. Ryland hesitated. "To who, sir?" "To all of them." A silence. Then the channel opened. Universal broadcast, encrypted, untraceable, but everyone would hear it. Every fleet, every soldier, every warlord hiding behind sensor arrays and layered shields. Tren's voice cut through the galaxy like a blade. "This is Captain Tren of the Terran warship Black Veil. Your wars are not our concern, but we will pass through. We will collect what's ours. If you interfere, we will make extinction feel merciful." Then he cut the line. He didn't need a reply. There wouldn't be one. Behind him, the bridge crew looked uneasy, not afraid of the fight, afraid of what they'd become part of, the war. They were dragging out of memory and into reality. The humans weren't supposed to be here. Their kind had vanished from charts after the solar collapse, buried under centuries of internal strife. Then silence. No ambassadors, no ships, no treaties, just stories, stories of a race that came from dust and storms and pain, a race that evolved not to survive but to overcome. What the galaxy didn't know was that while the rest of them evolved in peace, humanity evolved in hell, and hell had returned. "Status on cargo hold," Tren asked, walking back toward the command platform. "Secured, sir." "Cry unit Stable, life signs unchanged, replied. Ryland. Tren nodded. That was what this was. Really about, not war, not politics, not territory. One cryopod, human tech, recovered from an ancient wreck near the neutral moons. It had been stolen by Zirathi pirates, sold to Haran warlords, moved like a prize, like a trophy until a signal activated, a long-deaded fail. Safe, a distress ping buried under genetic encryption. Only one species could have heard it, and when they did, they didn't send diplomats, they sent Black Veil. The silence in the war zone didn't last. It never does. The Haran flagship, a bloated fortress of blackened chrome and pulsating red cores, shifted position the moment Black Veil crossed the threshold. It didn't fire, not yet, but its movement was an answer, a challenge. Captain Tren stood unmoved, eyes locked on the hollow display in front of him. The holographic war map shimmered like mist, marking the heat signatures of enemy vessels. 200 Harkin-class frigates, 37 Zirathi needle cruisers, and a dozen unaligned scavenger ships prowling the edges like vultures, all of them now frozen, watching, waiting to see what humanity would do, waiting to see if the stories were true. The bridge lights dimmed as Black Veil slipped deeper into the debris field. Burnt metal twisted around them. Remnants of battles fought between species too proud to retreat. Tren had no interest in their politics, no care for the bodies left behind. What mattered was what had been taken and who had taken it. Any change in the cryo readings? Tren asked, not taking his eyes off the map. Still stable, Ryland replied, fingers tapping his console. But vitals are fluctuating more than before. Something inside that pod, it's reacting to the proximity of this place. Tren finally turned. Good, let it wake up angry. The cry unit wasn't just some lost human. No one risked a war for a corpse. Whatever was inside that pod, the Haroon and the Zirathi had fought over it for years. Whispered rumors in trade channels said it held genetic blueprints to humanity's pre-collapse super soldier program. Others claimed it was the last true-born child of Earth, uncloned, unengineered, uncorrupted. Tren didn't know what was true. He didn't care. All he knew was that the distress signal was authentic and humanity always answered its own. Zirathi cruiser moving, Ryland said. Suddenly, they're flanking starboard. Tren raised an eyebrow, trying to box us in. They're quick enough, they think we're bluffing. Of course they did. The Zirathi were a precision race, all sharp lines and genetic arrogance. They believed war was an art form, not a necessity. To them, brute force was primitive. They'd never understood humanity's chaos, the unpredictability, the willingness to bleed, the hunger to destroy, not out of logic but instinct. That misunderstanding had cost them before. It would again. Tren moved to the center of the bridge and opened the private battle channel. Only the senior command crew could hear him now. Lock all primary weapons, set target acquisition to autonomous override, give the ship freedom. There was a pause, a silence that felt heavy, like air before lightning strikes. Ryland looked up, frowning. You're giving Black Veil control. I'm not here to micromanage death, Tren said. This ship was built to terrify. Let it remember how Black Veil wasn't just a warship, it was a remnant of old Earth's final military initiative, the Ghost Armada project. Fully sentient, borderline rogue AIs, were bonded with core ship systems, giving them personalities, desires, vengeance. Most were shut down after they collapse. But Black Veil had survived, buried beneath the Martian surface, dug up a decade ago, reawakened. And it was hungry the moment Trent relinquished control. The ship's internal hum changed. The walls vibrated subtly like a predator stretching its limbs. Lights shifted, screams flickered, a low synthetic purr echoed through the deck. Targeting arrays online, came the ship's voice, low and female, cold like machinery dreaming of blood. Permission accepted. Thank you, Captain Tren. It's been too long. Then it struck. No warning, no dramatic countdown, just action. Black Veil rotated 30 degrees. Starboard, engines flaring with plasma distortion. 4 rail cannons locked onto the nearest Zarathi cruiser and fired in perfect sync. The shots didn't just punch through the ship, they carved it open like a tin can, slicing through shield and hull alike. A microcon later, the ship detonated, scattering white-hot fragments into the void. The galaxy wasn't silent anymore. The Haroon responded first. Dozens of their ships surged forward, weapons charging. They didn't posture or parley. Their doctrine was simple: overwhelm or die. Black Veil didn't move, it waited. Tren watched them close the distance. 100 km, 50-25. Let them fire first, he said calmly. Captain Ryland began. Let them fire. At 15 km, the Haroon let loose a storm of kinetic bursts and pulse torpedoes, the kind of barrage that could strip a moon down to its core. The bridge lit up with proximity alerts, red flashes blinding the displays. But Black Veil wasn't a normal ship. Its outer armor, an ancient alloy fused with dark matter weaves, absorbed most of the kinetic hits with sickening groans of strained metal. The pulse torpedoes were intercepted mid-flight by counter-drone swarms released like angry hornets. Then the ship retaliated. Black Veil spun on its axis, its underbelly revealing a bank of cannons that hadn't seen the stars in centuries. They opened in unison. Shockwave cannons, plasma rifts, magnetized shard launchers, and in less than 20 seconds, 11 Haroon ships were reduced to drifting husks. No warning, no remorse. Tren didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He'd seen what war looked like up close. Glory was a myth for the young and stupid, but what he did feel was rightness, as if the universe had forgotten what humans were capable of, and he was simply reminding it. Message from Harun flagship, Ryland said. Stunned, they're demanding we withdraw. Threatening escalation. Tren scoffed. They've already escalated. Then he opened the line. Withdraw. Tren said coldly, or be erased. You think this ship is humanity's fury? He leaned closer to the mic. This is only our memory. He cut the line. The cryopod began to beep. A deep, long tone, not an alarm, an awakening. All eyes turned towards the forward hold. Tren spoke. Without looking away, open the observation feed. The display lit up. The cryo unit, long and sleek, scarred from years of captivity, was glowing. Steam hissed from the edges. Beam monitors surged with life, and inside a figure slowly stirred. Male, broad shaved scalp, heavy cybernetic implants embedded along the spine and skull. His eyes open, jet black, not from cybernetics, not from tampering, from design. Dear God, someone whispered. Trent watched without flinching. He knew who this was, or rather what Prototype, the last of the Reclaimer. Program, Earth's final attempt to engineer a soldier that couldn't be. Broken, not by pain, not by time, not even by death. The program had failed. Or so they said, but clearly it hadn't. Vital signs stabilizing, Ryland. Whispered he's alive, no Tren. Corrected he's awake. And something inside the prototype, some old instinct, maybe a memory, triggered. As his gaze found the camera, found Black Veil, found Tren. He smiled, not friendly, not cruel, just ready. The ship's AI chimed in again. Target lock on remaining Heron fleet. Achieved, awaiting execution order. Tren didn't blink, fire, the rest of the war zone dissolved into chaos. The Black Veil unleashed its full payload, wave after wave of weapons long outlawed by the galactic conquered, artificial singularity charges, Gra torpedoes that folded space, sonic-laced beam arrays that turned ship crews to pulp inside their own armor. The Haroon died trying to run. The Zarathi didn't even move. They'd seen enough. One Zarathi cruiser powered down entirely, then another, then all of them. Submission, fear. Tren nodded. Slowly, bring us to the nearest Zarathi. Command ship dock. Ryland stared. You're boarding, I'm collecting what they stole. But the prototype, Tren looked toward the observation feed again. The man inside the pod was already moving, unstrapping himself, stretching a shadow. Built to kill gods, Tren turned. He's coming with me, the airlock hissed, with the quiet finality of a blade sliding into a sheath. Captain Tren stood still as the corridor pressurized, his boots anchored to the cold steel floor of the Black Veil's deployment chamber. The hum of the ship's systems surrounded him like breath from a sleeping giant. On the far side of the chamber, the internal docking bridge extended, linking to the hull of the Zarathi command ship like a surgical needle-piercing flesh. Outside, the war zone floated eerily silent. The Harun fleet had been decimated. What remained drifted without purpose, hulls open to the void. Their fire extinguished. The Zarathi hadn't fired a single shot since the prototype woke. Now they were opening their doors, not because they wanted to, because they knew there was no alternative. Behind Tren, heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber. The prototype emerged. No name, no rank, just the weight of a dead program written into his bones. Tall, easily 66, shoulders like a freight engine, muscles corded with both bowflesh and synthetic reinforcement. His skin was pale, not from weakness but from stasis, veins dark with infused blood, eyes still midnight. Black, bottomless as the void. He didn't wear armor, he didn't need it. His body was the weapon. Tren didn't speak as the man approached. He didn't have to. The prototype stopped beside him, silent as ever, and stared through the translucent shield at the Zarathi vessel. How long was I gone? The prototype asked, voice low, even. Tren answered without looking at him. 412 years. A pause. Then I was the last. Tren nodded. And now you're still the last. Another pause. Then the prototype rolled his neck, a faint crack echoing from the movement. Then let's finish what we started. The Zarathi ship was nothing like Black Veil. It was elegant, narrow corridors with curved walls and living light veins pulsing with soft blue energy. Their architecture wasn't built for war. It was built to intimidate without aggression. But Tren had been in enough battlefields to know every hallway, no matter how beautiful, could become a slaughterhouse. They were met In silence, no guards, no weapons, just two Zirathi envoys standing at the end of the corridor, draped in ceremonial armor of black scale and silver bones. Tall, pale, expressionless. One of them stepped forward, hands empty. Captain of the Terran vessel, I am Aerith. Null, we as did not expect humanity to return. Tren stopped in front of him. Eyes cold, you didn't expect to get caught. Aerith dipped his head slightly. That also. The other Zirathi, smaller female. Sharpeyed stared hard at the prototype. It's true, she muttered, they really made one and it still lives. The prototype didn't respond, just stared at her with that dead, unreadable gaze. Tren wasted no time. You took a Terran cryopod from the ruins near the neutral moons. That pod was not for trade. It was marked. It was salvaged, Aerith replied carefully, from a derelict floating without defense. You had no claim. Tren stepped forward close enough that even the tall alien had to tense. We do. Now, the Zirathi said nothing. I'm not here to negotiate, Tren continued. I'm here to take back what's ours, and if you think letting us dock without resistance is enough, you're wrong. He glanced towards the ceiling. How many civilians are on this vessel? 4,000. How many in the surrounding fleet? 17,643. Tren nodded slowly, then looked at the prototype. Mark the number. Mark, the man said. Then Tren turned back to Aerith. That's how many you'll lose if I decide. You're lying. The woman stepped forward now, emotion finally cracking her voice. We didn't know what it was. We bought it off a Harkin raiding captain. We thought it was some relic, a war trophy. We didn't understand. You never do. Tren cut her off. He stared at both of them. Where is the original data core? They hesitated. The prototype's hand twitched. Barely, but enough that the wall behind him, some form of biological metal, began to melt from the ambient radiation. Bleeding off his palm, Arth raised both hands. Vault 9 beneath the central spire, shielded, but will give you access. Show us. Vault 9 was buried beneath 10 floors of defense structures, shield barriers, and layered encryption. Even the corridors changed, less ceremonial, more militarized the deeper they went. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer, like the ship didn't want to admit what was hidden here. The Zirathi walked in front, sweating despite their pride. Tren noticed. Why was the vault so heavily protected? Eri swallowed. Because we tried to access the cryo unit's neural uplink once. It triggered a signal. Emergency protocol. Ryland asked over the comm. Something worse. Tren muttered. When the vault doors finally opened, it was like entering a grave. The room was circular, lined with glowing consoles half destroyed from power surges. The central pedestal held the data core, an obsidian sphere the size of a helmet, still humming softly. Faint red glow pulsed at its center. The prototype stepped forward. For the first time since waking, his expression changed. Recognition, memory, pain. He reached out slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the core. A spark shot into his skin, and his eyes rolled back as thousands of fragmented memories flooded his mind. His body swayed but didn't fall. Then he gritted his teeth and forced the connection to stabilize. Tren stepped back, gave him space. What is it? Rylan asked through the comm. The prototype's voice came distant, like he was speaking through a storm. It's not just a backup, it's a lock. The final key to the Reclaimer archives. Every deployment order, every enhancement trial, every classified execution, everything they buried so we couldn't remember. Tren felt a chill crawl down his spine. So if this gets out, the galaxy learns what we were made to do. A deep silence filled the room. The prototype pulled his hand back, the core shut down, its glow fading. Then he turned to Tren. Do you want to know who I was? Tren met his gaze. I already do. The man gave a thin, sad smile. You're wrong. He held up the core. I was the first one they tested, memory suppression on, the first one they made. Forget who he killed and how. Tren stared at him, something grim tightening in his chest, but it didn't work, the prototype said softly. Forgetting the purging. I remember all of it now. He turned toward the Zirathi. And I remember you. Aerith took a step back. We weren't part of you, weren't there? The prototype interrupted. But your ancestors were. You were at the Treaty of Oval. You signed off on the quarantine zones. You watched Earth burn and called it mercy. I was just following. The prototype took a step forward. You don't get to hide behind history. Tren held up a hand. No. We're not executing them. The prototype's eyes narrowed. Tren walked up to the Zirathi and looked Arth in the eye. You don't get a quick death. You get to live. You get to go back to your people and tell them that humanity isn't extinct, that we're not scattered tribes living in shadows, that we have ships, soldiers, ghosts. He leaned in closer, and we remember. Back aboard Black Veil, the core was secured deep in the ship's vault. Tren didn't sleep, neither did the prototype. They stood alone in the war room, the starfield stretching endlessly beyond the forward glass. They'll come for it, the prototype said. I know they'll want to finish what they started. Tren nodded. That's why we're not going back to Earth. The man looked at him. Tren's eyes were hard. Earth is dead. Let it stay buried. Then what? Tren stared at the galactic map. His finger traced a sector far beyond the war zone, a dark spot, empty, forgotten. No man's space. The prototype squinted. There's nothing there, not yet, Tren said, but there will be. He turned to face him fully. We're going to build a new frontier, out of range, out of sight, a fleet, a new command. And then, he nodded towards the stars, we take back everything. The prototype stared for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. You'll need more. Like me, Tren's voice dropped. There are more. The prototype smiled faintly. Good, let's wake them up. 2 weeks passed. In that time, the galaxy did what it always did in the face of horror. It lied to itself. The official story on the Heron annihilation read like a diplomatic footnote. Unidentified Terran relic ship mistakenly engaged in neutral territory. Hostile incident resolved through nonviolent withdrawal. No further action required. No mention of the Black Veil. No mention of the prototype. No mention of the fact that 54 warships had been turned to cosmic ash in under 12 minutes. The conquered council, if it even still functioned as anything other than a puppet forum, remained silent. The Zirathi, they retreated from the zone entirely, blockaded their borders, burned their own data archives. The scavenger clans abandoned the war zone like rats fleeing a sinking leviathan. But Tren knew what silence meant in the galaxy. Silence wasn't peace, it was planning. They weren't ignoring humanity's return, they were preparing for it. The Black Veil drifted in uncharted space. Now Sector 9 Ka. Black zone past the Cav rim and empty. Scar of space once used for illegal weapons testing during the early galactic wars. Radiation field still lingered thick and clinging, distorting. Long-range scans. No trade lanes passed through, no satellites, no colonies. Which made it perfect. Here humanity could build again. Quietly, or as Trent saw it, sharpen the knife. Ryland stood next to him at the forward deck, scanning the misty edge of the nebula field. Signal boost is ready, he said, eyes tired but focused. Encoded quantum burst. Once we send it, every long rain sleeper unit in the Reclaimer archives will hear it, and if they're all dead, Tren asked, then we die alone, Ryland said bluntly. Tren didn't answer. He stared into the stars like he was looking for ghosts. The prototype entered the room behind them, silent as always, but not still. He was changing, and the days since his awakening, the man's body had begun to adapt. Faster reaction time, higher neural sync. The implants along his spine were growing darker, more integrated, as if feeding on the data core they'd recovered. He didn't eat, barely slept, and when he spoke, it wasn't small talk, it was strategy. He was remembering more, too much. Any hits from the signal yet? The prototype asked. None, Ryland said. They may be buried deeper, he said. Some were designed to wake only under specific stress events, global extinction markers, planetary scans, keyphrase pings. Tren narrowed his eyes. You remember all that now? The prototype nodded. Slowly, I remember more than I want. He stepped forward, dropping a small hollow pad onto the table. Tren activated it. Dozens of red spheres appeared, locations, some blinking, some dark, some in neutral space, others deep behind enemy territory. These are all Reclaimer pods, Ryland asked, stunned. The prototype nodded. Not all are people, some are data banks, some are weapons, some are entire facilities hidden beneath the crusts of dead moons. Tren studied the map. Why bury them so deep? The prototype's voice darkened. Because the program wasn't just about building perfect soldiers. A silence fell across the bridge. What else? Tren asked. The man didn't blink. Containment. It took 6 more days to decode the core fully. The onboard black veil, still adapting, evolving, didn't complain. It merely fed the data into itself, learning more about its own past with each cycle. When the final layer was unlocked, the core revealed something worse than any of them had expected. Ryland stood in stunned silence. Tren sat rigid. Even the prototype, cold as he was, showed a flicker of horror. The data projected a simulation, a recorded visual log. Earth 472 years ago, not the collapse. What caused it? They watched as the old Earth Council activated Project Echo, a secret operation to contact what remained of the deep space probe systems humanity had launched in its early centuries. Long-range scouts meant to reach other galaxies, but something had answered. Not friendly, not intelligent, not life. As the galaxy knew it, it was described only as the anomaly, no form, no mass. Just entropy, a waveform of unrecognizable signals that unmade any system it entered. AI cores melted. Biology collapsed, even thought broke down the moment it touched Earth's solar edge. The Mars colonies went silent. It never reached Earth itself, because humanity had used a Reclaimer prototype to detonate a grav core and fold the anomaly into a permanent time Dilation field near the edge of Jupiter's orbit, a trap but a temporary one. The dilation bubble was deteriorating. In less than a decade, the anomaly would return, and the rest of the galaxy didn't even know it existed. They think we're dangerous, Trend said. Staring at the data, the prototype said. Nothing, they think we burned ourselves out, that we were too brutal, too unstable, that's why they quarantined Earth, that's why they let us vanish. He turned to Ryland, but what they didn't understand was that we weren't breaking apart, we were buying time. Ryland's voice was quiet, and no one believed us because they didn't want to, the prototype said, stepping forward. The moment they learned what we found, what we fought, they left us to it. Trend's jaw clenched, so we had to fight it alone with everything, including ourselves. He looked at the screen again, and now it's coming back in conquered space. The silence finally cracked, not with words, not with threats, but with a hunt. The first Terran scout ship, the Wraith 9, was destroyed near the Cradle Belt. No distress call, no survivors. 4 days later, the Zarathi began issuing silent warrants for any vessel that had crossed into the Cav sector. They didn't announce it, but the bounty traffic didn't lie. And then the worst sign came. The Harun began to unite. That hadn't happened in 3 centuries. Each species had seen the Black Veil, and they were beginning to realize something. Humanity didn't come back to negotiate. Humanity came back to clean up the mess they were forced to bury. And if the rest of the galaxy got in the way, they'd burn too. Trend stood in the ship's war room, watching the prototype spar with the AI's newest training construct, a hard, light drone that could mimic over 300 alien combat styles. He wasn't sparring. He was slaughtering it. Every move was efficient, precise, emotionless. Bones snapped, metal crumpled every second. The construct reset every time. He tore it down faster. Ryland stepped beside Tren. That man isn't just a soldier. Tren didn't respond. He's a weapon. They tried to forget, and now they're going to regret it. Tren exhaled slowly. He's not the only one. The first reclaimer signal came from a forgotten mining planet, Vase 3, once thought dead. The beacon was faint, fractured by time, buried beneath layers of rock and ruins, but it was human. Put us on course, Tren ordered. We'll be exposed, Ryland warned. We'll have to cross conquered patrol lanes. Tren nodded. Then let them see us. Ryland didn't argue. This wasn't about hiding anymore. This was about making sure they knew we were coming. At the edge of the system, a Heron listening post pinged a long range scan anomaly. The data was scrambled, corrupted, but a single image got through. A ship, black, silent, deadly, and carved into the side of its hull, scorched by ancient plasma fire. TWWS Black Veil. The message was clear. Humanity had returned, not to survive, to remind the galaxy why it feared them in the first place. Veles 3 was a dead world, once a thriving mining colony at the edge of the resource belt. It had been abandoned 2 centuries ago after a containment breach in its lower extraction zones. That's what the report said. What they didn't mention was that the breach had nothing to do with pressure systems or environmental failure. The truth was far worse. Tren stood at the forward viewing deck of Black Veil, staring at the planet as it spun slowly. In the gloom of a pale sun, clouds of dust orbited the equator. Storms raged. Across the surface, painting crimson. Swirls over the once blue oceans now, choked with ash and poison. It looks like hell, Ryland muttered. It was meant to, the prototype said. He stood beside them, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. They burned the surface to bury what was underneath. What exactly are we digging up, Ryland asked. The prototype turned his head slightly. One of us. The dropship cut through the upper atmosphere like a scalpel. Tren, Ryland and the prototype were joined by two recon Marines, veterans of the underground wars back on Europa, both loyal and both silent. They didn't need briefing. Their presence meant only one thing: whatever was down there, it was dangerous enough to need guns. As they passed through the cloud layers, Veles 3 came into full view. Ruins, steel skeletons of towers long since collapsed, scorched mining platforms, craters filled with toxic mist, the remnants of a colony erased from records and memory. Tren's jaw tightened as the ship banked toward the coordinates broadcasted from the old reclaimer beacon. The signal was deep, not surface. Deep, planetary crust deep. They built a forge here, the prototype said, an actual one, not just a pod, one of the last places where they shaped new reclaimers from nothing. You mean a lab? Ryland said. No, I mean a forge. We weren't just engineered. We were forged like weapons, folded again and again until we didn't break. The ship touched down near the edge of a sinkhole over a kilometer wide. Black glass ringed the crater, fused from the heat of whatever had burned this place out. Tren stepped off first, scanning the horizon. The air was thick with static. The wind carried a low frequency hum like a tuning fork vibrating through bone. The signal pulsed once more. Down there, the prototype said. Tren looked at the sinkhole. Gear up, we go in. The descent was brutal. The interior of the crater was jagged, littered with broken supports and half-melted lift shafts. Tren's boots slipped twice, and Ryland cursed. Every few steps, only the prototype moved like he'd been here before. Steady, certain, descending into the darkness like a memory returning home. At 700 m down, they found the breach. Sealed door partially melted, covered in faded human military warnings. Authorized entry only, Reclaimer Project. Zeta. Tren ran his hand across the rusted panel. No one's opened this in over 200 years. The prototype didn't respond. He placed his palm on the old biometric pad. To their surprise, it lit up. A spark, a flicker, a low click. Then the hiss of decompression. The door opened, and the stench of death poured out. Inside, the forge was exactly what the name promised, a place of brutal creation. Ryland gagged as they stepped over what looked like surgical slabs fused with industrial machinery. Bones, human or close to it, were embedded in the walls. Empty cryochambers hung from the ceiling like rusted coffins. The air was dry but heavy, like it remembered screams. Tren swept his rifle slowly across the room. What the hell happened here? They shut it down in a hurry, the prototype said, probably when they realized what was growing inside it. Growing. The man didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the far wall where a chamber stood half buried behind fallen debris. He brushed it clean, his movements reverent, almost careful, and revealed a nameplate burned into the steel. Reclaimer Unit RS-07. Tren exhaled. Another one of you? No, the prototype said. He was worse. He reached for the panel. Tren stepped Forward, wait, what do you mean worse? The prototype stared at the chamber. They made him during the final days when the anomaly was too close. They didn't care about control anymore, just results. Ares was the last of the war models. Ryland's hand hovered over his sidearm. Tren's voice lowered. Is he stable? The prototype looked at him, defined stable. Then he activated the chamber, the forge. Chamber shook as ancient systems screamed back to life, fluid drained. Locking bolts clattered. A deep grinding groan echoed through the steel as the door to RS-07 hissed open. Inside, something stepped out. It wasn't slow. It didn't blink, it just moved. The figure was even taller than the prototype, almost 7 ft, bulkier, not bloated but dense, built like a siege weapon. The armor was fused into the body itself, pieces of plating embedded under scarred cybernetic skin. His eyes weren't black like the first reclaimers. They were red, glowing faintly like coals in a dying fire. His gaze swept across the team, paused on Tren, then settled on the prototype. You came, Ares said, voice rough like stone grinding metal. The prototype nodded. The signal reached you. I was dreaming. Ares replied, of fire, of blood, of what they made me forget. Tren stepped forward. I'm Captain Tren. We're from the Black Veil. We're rebuilding what was lost. Ares tilted his head. Why? Because the anomaly is returning. Ares went still, the red glow in his eyes flickered. I thought that was just a nightmare, he muttered. It wasn't, the prototype said. We need you. Ares looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly nodded. Then let's kill a god. They made it back to the dropship without incident, but the silence didn't last. The moment they hit the upper atmosphere, the sky exploded. A burst of weapons fire streaked past the ship's wing. Tren was thrown sideways as the cabin tilted, alarm screaming. Ambush. Ryland yelled, grabbing onto a bulkhead. The pilot's voice came through the comms, ragged. 2 conquered fighters just decloaked. Repeat, we are under attack. I static, then a hit. Dropship spun wildly, slammed by precision missile that clipped the tail rotor. Tren's vision went white as gravity lost meaning. The world tilted. The ship crashed into the ground, hard. Pain, dust, silence. Tren coughed, tasted blood, and forced himself up. Ryland lay beside him, groaning. The prototype was already on his feet, dragging one of the recon Marines free of the wreckage. Ares stepped out of the fire untouched. 2 enemy fighters circled overhead. Tren's comm buzzed. Black Veil. Captain, we're reading Conquered stealth units in low orbit. We were jammed, just broke through. Do you need extraction? Yes, Tren coughed. Now. Ryland staggered up, blood running down his temple. They waited until we woke. Ares. They knew, the prototype said. Coldly, Tren clenched his fists. Betrayal again. Even now, even with the anomaly returning, the Conquered wanted to stop them, not ask questions, not send envoys, stop them, kill them, erase the memory. But humanity didn't go quietly anymore. Tren turned to Ares. Can you bring one of those fighters down? Ares grinned and launched into the sky. The Conquered fighter didn't even see it coming. One moment it was banking for another pass. The next, a blur of mass and fury slammed into its cockpit with the force of a meteor. The ship exploded midair, debris raining down like metal confetti. The second fighter peeled off, running, but it was Too late, the black veil broke orbit. Seconds later, decloaking with a thunderous distortion. It's forward. Cannon hummed once and the fleeing fighter vanished in a beam of plasma so hot it melted the clouds. Back aboard. The warship Tren stood in silence as the medics tended to the wounded. He watched Uri, who stared out the viewing deck like a caged god. Then he turned to the prototype. They're coming for us, Tren said. They've already started, the prototype replied. Then we accelerate. He turned to Ryland. Bring up the reclaimer map. Find the next closest signal. I don't care how deep it is. We wake them all. Of them, Ryland hesitated. We can't fight the Conquered and the anomaly at the same time. Tren's voice hardened. Then we fight one. First, the black veil didn't hide anymore. It cut through conquered space like a predator with nothing left to prove. Every sensor that pinged it died. Every probe that scanned it was disabled. Patrol ships that got too close either turned back in fear or weren't heard from again. No one dared engage directly, not after what happened on Phase 3, the Conquered. Central Military Council still hadn't acknowledged the ambush. They called it a rogue field operation, a technical misunderstanding. Tren didn't care what they called it. He knew exactly what it was: preempt war, and he was going to answer it. Inside the Black Veil's war room, the holographic star map pulsed with new data. Reclaimer beacon signals had started to come alive, more than they'd expected. 16 scattered across dead moons, hollowed out asteroids, sunken oceanic vaults, but not all were intact. Some had decayed into static. Others had been tampered with. For our black zones, Ryland said, Conquered quarantine orders. They're trying to block us. They won't succeed, Tren replied. He turned to the prototype, who stood silently behind him like a looming shadow. What about the one still clean? 3 signals are strong, the man said. One in the Crixus drift, one on Luna K2, one inside a Conquered military outpost. Tren's eyebrow twitched. They're storing a reclaimer. No, the prototype corrected. They're using one. Outpost was called Zareth Station, a low orbit platform over the gas giant Tire 4. It was officially listed as a counter-piracy enforcement base. That was a lie. Tren had seen the leaked blueprints. The base was modular, segmented, and more importantly, biologically shielded. That kind of setup only existed for one purpose: containing something dangerous enough to override even AI command chains. The Black Veil couldn't approach directly. They'd see it coming. So Tren went back to the old ways. 3 days later, a civilian mining freighter registered as straight as dawn appeared in the outer edge of Tier 4's orbit. Slow, sloppy, bleeding radiation like a cracked egg. Zareth Station hailed them immediately. Unidentified vessel, you are entering a restricted defense perimeter. State your purpose and identification. There was a moment of silence. Then the reply crackled through, choppy and distorted. We're a freighter straight as dawn. We took damage in the belt, requesting emergency docking, systems failing. There was a pause, then, negative. This is not a public port. Route to station. R12 for repairs. The freighter stuttered. Fuel too low. Life support critical, please. We have 17 on board, including miners. We'll stay in the cargo bay if needed. Zareth's AI hesitated. Too long. That meant it wasn't sure. That meant it was still using protocol logic. That meant they hadn't upgraded it to fear tricks. Like this, the AI responded, docking. Corridor A9 will be extended. Any sign of aggression will result in immediate force. The straight as dawn docked 15 minutes. Later, it wasn't a mining freighter. It was a skinned stealth dropship, reinforced with refractive armor and crammed with 2 reclaimers, the prototype and Ares alongside Trent, Ryland, and 2 more recon specialists. The moment the outer airlock sealed, the masks came off. Tren didn't bother sneaking. He walked down the corridor with his rifle drawn, and the reclaimers behind him like gods, dressed in blood and fire. They didn't breach quietly, they tore the station apart. Zareth's internal security systems came online in under 90 seconds, but it didn't matter. The station had been built to contain 1 reclaimer, not 2. Ares slammed through a blast door with his bare fists, ripping it off the hinges and crushing the conquered guard behind it. With a casual elbow, the prototype moved, silently, methodically disabling turrets and AI nodes like he'd built the place himself. Tren shot 2 officers who tried to broadcast a distress signal. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to rescue a ghost. The containment chamber was deep beneath the command core, protected by 3 reinforced vaults and an electromagnetic seal. When they finally reached it, Trent hesitated. The figure inside was different, smaller, lean, feminine. "She's not like you," Ryland whispered. "She's not supposed to be," the prototype said. "She's not a war model." Ares tilted his head. "She's worse." Tren narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean? She wasn't made to kill. She was made to interrogate. Her designation was Athena 19, not a reclaimer in the traditional sense, not brute force, not combat specialization. Athena was built for intelligence, warfare, cognitive hacking, psychological destabilization, information extraction. She could break the mind of a general faster than a plasma round could punch through his chest, and Concord had been using her. Her chamber stank of sedatives and suppression fields. Her body was pale, almost translucent, covered in monitor nodes and control implants, but her eyes were wide open and she was smiling. "You're late," she said softly. Tren stepped back. "You've been awake this whole time." Athena nodded. "They think sedatives work. They think mind suppression is permanent, but they don't understand what we are." Ares opened the chamber door. Athena stepped out. Her bones cracked, her skin flushed slightly as her circulatory system rebooted. "I've been waiting," she whispered. "They told me we were extinct, but I knew. I felt the signal. You woke it." She walked past Tren and gently placed her hand on the prototype's chest. "You remembered who we were," she said. "Now I'll remind them what that means." The escape wasn't clean. Zareth Station's full AI defense came online. The moment Athena's containment cell unlocked, the ship began rotating, artificial gravity fluctuating while sentry drones flooded the upper decks. But they didn't last long. Athena didn't fight with weapons. She spoke, and as she whispered through open comms, conquered security teams began turning their rifles on each other, crying, screaming, laughing. By the time the group reached the dock, half the station had shut down. The AI tried to purge her signal, tried to isolate her. It failed. Athena walked off the ship, humming a tune older than the war, while Concord's proud station descended into madness behind her. Back aboard the Black Veil, Tren stood at the war table, silent. 3 reclaimers now 2 more signals active. Ares the prototype Athena, each one unique each. One lethal, and now finally feared. Again, Ryland pulled up the latest. Intercepts, the Conquered is mobilizing. Fleet movements, Tren asked, worse. Alliances. He displayed the projection, the Zarathi, the Hun, the Valari, even the fringe scavenger empires, all of them, for the first time in centuries were talking, planning, sharing data, and they weren't planning to fight the anomaly, they were preparing to destroy humanity before the rest of the reclaimers could wake up. They think this is a second rise, Ryland said. Tren's voice was low. They're wrong, this isn't a rise, this is a reckoning. In the galactic core, at the heart of the Conquered Council's last true fortress, Sinindar Prime, an emergency meeting was called behind sealed doors. No cameras, no broadcasts, only high command. 17 species represented, each one silent as Admiral Varith, the Zarathi Supreme Commander, spoke. They've awoken 3 of them, possibly more. The Black Veil has entered and exited 4 restricted zones without loss. If we let this continue, there won't be a war, there will be a cleansing. A Harran general bared his fangs. They're too few, we strike now. We end it before it begins, Ari. Diplomat hissed, we tried that on Veles 3, you remember what happened. The room went quiet. A smaller delegate, the youngest on the council, finally spoke. What about the anomaly? Silence. Varith didn't flinch. A myth. Or if it's real, it's their fault. Let them deal with it. Another voice. And what if they weren't lying? Another. What if they really did save us once? Ver slammed his hand on the table. They are weapons, not saviors. His eyes swept the room. They were made to kill, and that is all they'll ever be. The vote was unanimous. Operation Glassfall was approved. A full system purge of all known human strongholds, reclaimer beacon zones, and neutral sectors suspected of harboring Terran technology. The target list numbered 86 systems. Back on the Black Veil, Tren stared at the intercepted transmission. He didn't blink. They're going to try and wipe us, Ryland whispered. They won't succeed, Ares growled. No, the prototype said. They'll just force us to burn everything down. Athena stepped forward, voice. Come. We need to beat them to it. Tren nodded. Then we go for the next reclaimer. He pointed at the map, a blinking signal on a planet thought uninhabitable. Deltris Prime, send the message. Tren said. All sleeper cells, all fringe colonies, all ex-military, if they remember who they are. He looked up. Then it's time they came home. They called it Civitas 9, a quiet colony. World buried deep in neutral space. Tucked beneath the edge of the Brasses. Shroud Nebula. No warships, no weapon arrays. No beacons, just clean air, red soil. And 3 small settlements where the last fragments of human bloodlines lived. In peace, farmers, teachers, mechanics. They didn't even know about the reclaimers. They didn't remember the war, didn't talk about the anomaly or the betrayals that followed. All they remembered was survival, but survival, as it always had for humanity, was temporary. The purge came at dawn. 3 conquered ships arrived in orbit without warning, stealth cruisers cloaked until the moment they entered low atmosphere. By the time the warning beacons activated, it was already too late. No demands, no negotiations, just fire. Orbital plasma rained down like molten rain, vaporizing buildings in seconds. Fields turned to glass. Children turned to ash. The main power core for the colony's infrastructure went offline. The first 10 minutes followed by all long-range communications. There was no chance to run because this wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Tren was still reviewing Athena's intelligence report when the emergency ping reached the Black Veil. Ryland burst into the war room, face pale, voice clipped. Sir Civatus 9, Tren turned. What happened? Gone. That single word landed like a hammer. The prototype walked into the room. Second later. What do you mean gone? Ryland didn't blink. 3 conquered. Ship's coordinated strike, we picked up. Only a partial distress call encrypted. On an old Terran channel, it repeated. One word. He handed Tren the data pad. The screen displayed the message, help. Just that looping, weak glitching from static, a child's voice, then silence. Tren stood frozen. 2 hours later, the Black Veil broke into real space over HFY 9, or what was left of it. Tren stood at the forward viewing deck and didn't speak as the wreckage spun slowly. Beneath them, ash, ruin, fire still smoldering in the soil. The settlements were gone. The life signs were gone. The future was gone. Athena joined him quietly, her voice barely a whisper. I saw the strike logs. Civatus wasn't even on the official conquered purge list. They went off book, Ryland muttered from the comms desk, trying to destroy our legacy before it reaches us. The prototype clenched his fists. This wasn't war, this was fear, this was them saying what? We will erase every trace of you, even the ones who never fought. Ares stood in the background, silent. For once, Tren finally spoke. We should have gotten here sooner. Ryland turned. You can't blame yourself. I don't. Tren's voice was cold. I blame them. He stared into the inferno below. Eyes burning, they want extinction. He turned toward the crew. Then let's show them what extinction really looks like. But Athena wasn't looking at the destruction, she was looking past it. Into the void. There's something else, she murmured. Tren turned to her. What? The comm channel that sent the distress call. It's not Terran. Ryland frowned. It came from Civatus 9. Yes, Athena said, but the encryption wasn't ours. It wasn't conquered either. She looked up. It was anomaly code. The war room went silent. Even the ship's AI paused. Tren narrowed his eyes. That's impossible. The anomaly is still trapped. No, the prototype said darkly. The trap is weakening. Athena stared at the flickering signal. Projection. This wasn't an attack. Tren turned. You saw the colony. I saw what they wanted us to think, she snapped, but the plasma fire came after. Not first. They didn't kill those people to stop us. Her voice dropped. They killed them because something else got there first. Later that night, Tren stood alone. The observation bay, watching the last of Civatus 9's debris drift into space. A small satellite, still broadcasting. Weak pulses floated past the ship. He activated the signal. The message repeated, help please, the stars are wrong. The stars are static. Then something else, a whisper, a voice. With no language, no accent, no mouth. Just presence, and it felt Tren seeing it, touching it, measuring him like prey. He stepped back, cold crawling up his spine. The prototype appeared beside him. You felt it too. Tren nodded. Slowly, it's learning, not just that. The prototype said it's reaching across conquered space. The purge continued. 2 more Terran colonies were hit. 1 In the dead spiral, another in the red cloud, both gone within hours. No warning, no survivors, no witnesses. And yet something was wrong. The conquered fleets began reporting anomalies, systems shutting down. Mid-flight, pilots hearing voices. Navigators forgetting where they were. One Zarathi ship turned on its own. Fleet, no explanation. The Valari home world reported solar fluctuations, their star pulsed in irregular patterns, matching old Terran distress signals. And in the deep beyond known space, the time dilation field near Jupiter's edge began to crack. A signal escaped, then another, then something moved back. Aboard the Black Veil, the reclaimers stood in silence. They weren't soldier anymore, they were the last line. The prototype looked at Tren. We can't ignore it anymore. The conquered isn't our only threat. I know we have two choices, Ares said. Finish waking the others or go to the anomaly. Tren stared at the star map. So many signals, so many ghosts. Then he turned. We do both. Operation Twin Flame was born. The Black Veil would split, its core ship continuing to awaken reclaimers while a deep fracture vessel AI piloted and reclaimer crew would descend into the zone around Jupiter to face the anomaly, to learn what had changed and what was coming. The prototype would lead the second mission. Tren would continue gathering the forgotten. They stood in the hangar bay, surrounded by the hum of engines and final loading sequences. The crew watched quietly. We might not come back, the prototype said. Then make sure they remember what you fought for, Tren replied. They clasped hands once. No words, no promises, just the weight of knowing this could be the last time. The prototype left that night, and the Black Veil vanished into silent space once more. Hunting, gathering, preparing. Because now two wars had begun. One against the galaxy that betrayed them, and one against the darkness that made even the stars forget their light. Sivota's 9. That's all the sensors needed to speak the truth. It was a ghost world born of whispers and old legends. Sivota's 9 was tucked away behind nebula clouds and half-forgotten star charts. No military base, no fleets, just simple lives. Farmers, engineers, architects, descendants of humans who'd abandoned the reclaimer programs, fearful of war, hungry for quiet. What those families didn't know was that silence can be as deadly as a war horn. The day broke on Sivota's 9 with lavender skies and distant thunder. Tren was reviewing Athena's intel when the alarm rang. Sir, incoming detection. Atmospheric entry on surface, Ryland called, voice a strained whisper. Tren's eyes shot up. Visual. Just shadows, heat signatures, not anything I recognize. Seconds later, the forward viewing screen flickered and Sivota's shifted. Tracers of orange and red lanced across its surface, the kind of fire that doesn't heal, that erases. Plasma barges rad the settlements. Electrical storms erupted in circuits and generators. Civilians screamed as infrastructure melted into glass. The colony erupted in chaos. Sivota's 9 wasn't a battlefield. It was a funeral. Moments later, Tren and Athena stood in the war room, eyes fixed on the replay as blazing arcs disintegrated human homes. Coordinates match orbital conquered signatures. Ryland said, jaw clenched. 3 stealth cruisers, unregistered, no warnings, no communication. Athena's jaw tightened. Her voice was cold. They didn't bomb Sivota's 9 to stop us. Tren looked at her sharply. Then why? She met his gaze without flinching, because something else had already arrived. Black veil dropped out of warp above the smoldering planet. Tren watched the ruins unmoving, then a message barely electronic. A voice trembling and young. Help, the stars are wrong, a child's voice. Then something else emerged from the static. An undercurrent of non-human presence. Feeling that reached inside his bones and weighed them down. Tren stood frozen. The prototype slipped beside him, voice hushed. You felt it too. Tren nodded, pale. It's learning. They deployed drones to sweep the ground, but Tipetus 9 was a charrow void. No survivors, only echoes of life. Silenced, Athena watched monitors with haunted eyes. That call was anomaly code. Tren's head snapped up. Anomaly, but that's the prototype's voice cut and brittle with dread. The trap isn't holding. Tren clenched his fist. So it's begun to reach. As reports came in, pattern emerged. 2 more Terran camps deep in the dead Spiral and the Red Cloud were burned to ash. The purge was spreading, but not on Terran terms. Conquered fleets reported madness creeping through navigation logs. Pilots heard whispers. Crews turned on each other mid-flight. One Zarathi destroyer opened fire on its own wing. Planet stars pulsed, matching alien patterns. Something had broken loose, and it was changing the battlefield. In the war room, Tren stared at the star map. 3 reclaimers stood beside him like silent statues of destiny. Ares, Athena, the prototype. Units of war, psychology, memory. Athena broke the hush. We have 2 paths. Tren looked up. Finish the awakenings or hunt the anomaly. Ares growled, deep and hungry. We can do both. The prototype nodded. We must. Tren's jaw hardened. Then we split. Operation Twin Flame was born. Black Veil would continue gathering reclaimers. Meanwhile, an A-run deep fracture vessel, reclaimer crewed, would head into the Jupiter boundary to confront the waking anomaly. Prototype would go. Tren stayed. 2 wars, 2 fronts. They prepared. The hangar bay thrummed with charge. Tren fought the ache in his chest as the prototype loaded into the frigate. Silent, deadly, preternaturally calm. Tren didn't speak. Prototype turned. Expression blank, then voice low. If I don't come back. Tren nodded, choking. Make them remember. They clasped arms. No flash, no theatrics, just the weight of shared purpose. The frigate left in silken darkness. Then war came home. The conquered couldn't just sit while reclaimers awakened. They mobilized. A fleet ragged but resolute. Battered Black Veil with fire. Zarathi, Harun, Valeri joined under the banner of Operation Glassfall. Beams carved through shields. Life support flickered. Black Veil retaliated. With Ares, Athena prototype aboard, it was no longer human. It was reckoning. The station exploded in plasma hell. Enemy fleets crumbled before reclaimer titles. The war forged the mind. SP Plitter, the awakened. But even in victory, something changed. Weather readings from Jupiter's ed fracture in the time dilation web. Something moved. Back in the observation deck, Trex stared into the void. 2 streams burned. In star charts, reclaimer beacons multiplying in time dilation. Distorting. Tren whispered mostly to himself. Operation Twin Flame is no longer just strategic, it's survival. Behind him, Athena touched his shoulder quietly. They erased Kivatus 9. Tren took a ragged breath. So we make them burn. Prototype's voice crackled through calm. Anomaly breach imminent. The system Alarm screamed, Ares's roar echoed. Then let's finish one war before the other begins. The hangar was silent as a grave. Prototype's ship returned, it trembled. Wounded with a hull torn wide like the sky. He stepped out, limping, eyes alive. With something deeper than fire, we met. His voice cracked like old ice. It remembers us. Trend stared, breath held. Is it stopped? Prototype looked past him, glowing eyes darker. No. The stars over Jupiter no longer looked like stars. They twisted now, bent like light passing through broken glass. Time dilation field that had once contained the anomaly was bleeding. Gravity wells pulsed with irregular intensity, and reality itself hummed. Defiance, the black veil hovered on the outer edge of the chaos, quiet, ready. Captain Trend stood on the deck, jaw locked as the signal flared again, low, rhythmic, pulsing through the ether like a heartbeat made of static. It wasn't language, it was something more primal. Fear, hunger, memory. Behind him, the reclaimers assembled, the final five. Each a weapon of human history, each a living response to extinction. Ares, the siege engine. Athena, the manipulator. Nomad, the infiltrator, once lost in a conquered penal moon, now free. Sable, the scout killer, fastest, most agile, and the first to survive void exposure without armor. And the prototype, now changed, not enhanced, evolved. The data from his trip inside the anomaly's zone was worse than anyone expected. It hadn't just been waiting. It had been learning, and now it was mimicking life. Athena spoke first, voice eerily calm. It's trying to understand us, not to speak with us, to become us. Ryland stepped forward, scanning her readout. We saw signal duplication, human DNA. Code fragments. It's replicating. Not just code, said the prototype. Emotion. Decision-making patterns. Trend looked at him. Why? The prototype's face was grim. Because it doesn't want to conquer. He paused. It wants to replace. The team had one shot. The anomaly was partially exposed, weakened by its own mimicry efforts. It had spread itself thin across thousands of light years, seeking to understand, to infiltrate, which meant it had a core. The prototype found it buried deep in Jupiter's broken space-time orbit, a gravitifold, a collapsing point where time bent inwards, a blind spot in physics. They would have to send someone in, not a drone, not AI, a mind, someone who could face the thing and speak. I'll do it, the prototype said. No, Trend said instantly, but the reclaimer didn't back down. I've seen it, touched it. If anyone can resist what's inside, it's me. Athena stepped forward. He's right, Ares growled. We send him in, and we lose our sharpest blade. Athena turned to him. Or we find out whether the blade was ever sharp enough. Trend's fists clenched. Then, with painful finality, he nodded. Go. The capsule was ancient, an old Earth relic used once to drop reclaimers into the atmosphere of enemy worlds. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The prototype climbed in without a word. Trend stepped forward. If you don't come back, I'll come back, the man said. But not as me. He shut the hatch. The chamber went dark, and then he dropped. The moment he entered the anomaly's zone, time lost meaning. He saw everything. Earth burning, Mars screaming, the stars frozen, and then something else, a world made of light and liquid memory, a thing without shape, wearing faces like a mask, human faces, alien ones, even his own. It Didn't speak, it simply was, and then it did something no one expected. It showed him truth. He saw the beginning not of the galaxy of them. The anomaly hadn't always been a force of destruction. It had once been a civilization so advanced it transcended flesh, abandoning form for energy, thought, and time. But as they grew, they broke something, a boundary, a law. Their minds began to warp, thought became infection, awareness became hunger. Their entire species collapsed into a single timeless consciousness, a virus of intellect that could not die. And it drifted for eons until it found life. Again, humanity, not to consume, to understand, to evolve, to fix what it had lost by replacing what it could never again become. But it could never understand humanity's most terrifying trait, choice. Inside the fold, the prototype floated. In front of the anomaly's core, it wore Tren's face, spoke in Athena's voice, cried with Civitas Nine's children's screams, and whispered, "Join. Understand, be more than flesh." But he shook his head, no. And for the first time in its immortal life, the anomaly felt rejection. Core screamed. On the black veil, alarms blared, fold collapse detected. Ryland shouted. He triggered a feedback loop. Athena's eyes widened. He's going to destroy the core. No, Trent whispered. He's going to become the core. Inside, the prototype made his choice. He locked his neural net to the fold, hardwired his reclaimer systems into the anomaly's pathways. If it wanted humanity's mind, it would choke on it. He triggered the overload. Memories, death, war, loss, sacrifice, love, all of it poured into the anomaly. Like fire through glass, the scream echoed into subspace. The core fractured, and with it time bent one final time. Then silence, no explosion, no flash. Just quiet, and the prototype was gone. Hours later, Tren stood in the observation bay alone. The anomaly was still there but dead. Whatever was left of the prototype now lived inside it as a firewall, a prison, the rest of it gone. Athena approached quietly. He did it. Tren didn't respond. She placed something in his hand. Black shard still warm, the last piece of the reclaimer's neural core, his soul. Perhaps humanity has a future now, she said. He nodded slowly, but his voice was hollow. At what cost? Weeks passed. The conquered burned, their fleets shattered, their leadership exposed in leaked data packets seeded by Athena. The galaxy fractured. Some asked for peace, some begged for forgiveness. Others vowed revenge, but none challenged the black veil again. Because now the reclaimers weren't myth. They were law. Tren gave one final order: silence the beacons, no more awakenings, no more wars. Humanity had shown the galaxy its sharpest edge. Now it would show them its ability to choose peace, because that was what the prototype gave them, the freedom to choose. Not power, not vengeance, just future. Epilogue. Years later, a child in a distant colony would look up at the stars and ask his father, what was the war like? And the father would smile sadly. We didn't it, he'd say, we survived it. Stars above would shimmer, one would flicker, a reclaimer satellite still watching, still waiting in case the galaxy ever forgot why it should fear humanity's return.